Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2019. Happy Valentine's Day to those of you, I don't know, so we say, to those of you celebrating, to people not celebrating, people don't do anything in particular for it. Does anybody hate Valentine's Day? I suppose that's possible. Of course, well, there are many reasons to mark the day, and one of them is reason to perhaps dislike the day, if not outright hate the day. Of course, it is, as it happens, unfortunate happenstance, I think, unless the shooter had some idea in mind. But of course, the first anniversary of the Parkland High School shooting, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting in Parkland, Florida. And so, dark note on the Valentine's Day festivities there, but this is something we deal with almost every day. We're almost always under the cloud of a mass shooting, but an important one in our history of dozens, hundreds, I guess, perhaps, if all be told all at once. So we have that to mark as well. And our regular news roundup, which is easily as depressing as almost anything else you might be able to come up with. What a day. How do you, like, some highs and lows right out of the box for Valentine's Day 2019. Lots to round up. A lot of long reads we should catch up on. We'll see what Greg has in mind for today. Today is the day they'll be beginning the voting process on the deal that is supposed to avoid the next shutdown. Again, all systems are nominal for that. No sign outwardly that the president is ready to reject it. And some efforts from out of the White House to call the conservative commentators linked to Fox News. That is to say, Bill, what's his name? Is the guy from? Now I can't remember his name. The guy from Fox News who moved over to the White House operation. Yeah, the one whose crazy wife was tweeting yesterday that measles cures cancer or something like that. Has spent the last couple of days calling his old colleagues and essentially begging them not to trash the deal on television so that the president can sign it and not have to worry about another shutdown. So far, it hasn't worked entirely. I think Sean Hannity has agreed to buy in. Ann Coulter, I do not think, has agreed to buy in. And Toby Lowry, Tammy Hammy, whatever her name is, the young girl who does the videos and thinks she's famous, also not buying in and clashing violently, one might even say. There's no violence as far as I'm aware. Clashing with President Trump on that one. As a matter of fact, I think I saw last night that Raw Story had a pretty amusing, story. Just to use this, it's not my fault. That's the name of the site, is Raw Story, and they run stories. I don't know if they're raw or not, but they do run stories, and we're stuck with that. So, where was it? There it is. Yes, Tomi Lahren, Lahren, who apparently, according to the Raw Stories tweet, and then we'll read their story, slams Trump for sham border deal. Then, of course, gets attacked by Trumpsters who insist the wall is being built as we speak. So this is one of those sort of, I guess, like for a Giants fan like me, a Philadelphia Eagles, Washington Redskins game, or breadsticks, as I like to call them, until they changed their name. Forgot about that one. Game like that, and I root for a tie in which everybody, I don't know. I used to say root for injuries, but now I realize how serious and severe the injuries can be, and I can't do that anymore. So I just root for everybody to oversleep and miss the game, I guess. And everybody forfeits. That's pretty much what I'm hoping for. Actually, now in a lot of games. I didn't watch any football this year. Not none, but I don't recall watching any games, and it probably has something to do with both the distaste that's overcome me for it, and of course the fact that Giants were no good anyway, so it wasn't doing anybody any good, not entertaining in any fashion to watch the game. But in this one, we root for the same thing. I guess for the Tomi Lahren and Trumpsters who insist the wall is being built as we speak to, let's say, I don't know. What do we want to say? But they slip on a banana peel, both of them, and they're out for a couple of days. Everybody sprain your ankles and leave us alone. Get off the television set. That seems like a pretty good fight to have, though. Conservative commentators slamming the wall deal or the wall-less deal, and Trumpsters angry with their heroes and yelling at them, insisting, the entirely false assertion that the wall is already pretty much done and it'll be done in about 15 minutes and it's 1,000 feet high. And don't you understand how you're lying to us? It would be great if they all negated one another and they all exploded in a giant, I don't know what, neutron star that collapsed on itself and we never had to hear from him again. That would be great. Anyway, so happy Valentine's Day to all of you. Those are my Valentine's wishes for you. Greg Dworkin is here. Good morning, Greg. Have a box of chocolates at the ready or anything for today?
Good morning. As I saw on Twitter, I can't remember who said it, but basically the reason to eat chocolate is to wash all the non-chocolate taste out of your mouth, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful idea.
Yeah, they keep filling the chocolates with non-chocolate things. Some of them go well. But,
so you got to keep eating.
Yeah. Others do not.
Yeah,
so
depends what you get. So listen, some breaking news, which is good news on Valentine's Day. A tentative deal reached in the Denver teacher strike, $25.5 million more in new money. The district says raising teacher salaries, base salaries, and preserving incentives are now welcoming teachers to go back to work.
Yeah.
And the union hasn't voted on it yet, but a tentative deal is a good news thing.
Okay.
Just as a tentative not close the government down deal is a good thing.
Tomi Lahren says, stop the teacher strike deal. Get back out.
Yeah. So
learn.
A couple of process things here. I always turn to you when I don't quite understand things. So whatever was agreed to by, as people are now calling them, the appropriators, I presume that comes with capital letters, like very serious people.
Yes.
So the appropriators sat down and they agreed to appropriate. And what happened is that Richard Shelby, the Republican lead, and Pat Leahy, the Democratic lead, signed something. And then the process appears to be that the Senate votes first and then the House. That's the way they set it up?
Yeah.
I thought the House was always first, but what do I know?
Well, I don't know. I guess I think I never did get the chance to look this up, and perhaps I'll clarify it here on the air. Now, my guess is that given the the circumstantial evidence that we have now, that they signed something and that the Senate is going first, leads me to believe that they have sent some vehicle to conference, and that what they signed was the conference report. That's why there were members from both houses there. And that now the conference report is done. The last house in possession of the papers. Remember the papers that go back and forth.
Well, I have a picture of the papers. This is a picture of Nita Lowey holding a big stack of papers in her hands as she, it's right at the bottom of the list I sent you.
Okay.
Hold spending border bill just now. It's being filed in the House. So she walked over with a stack of papers that looks to be about 1.5 feet high.
Wow. They should have printed on one of those little candy hearts.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Oh, yeah. That looks like a big stack. I can't see what it says on the cover, but if I could, it would tell us, the bill number for one thing, and then we would figure out what is going on with the rest of it. I guess.
But there is physical moving of paper back and forth. Just
there
for
is.
The record,
right. So there it is. And the House last in possession of the papers, I believe is the way it works, gets to vote first. That's why the Senate can vote first on things that they usually insist that the House vote first on. Although I always, honestly, I think the constitutional language is that revenue bills have to be done in the House first. And this isn't revenue. It's the opposite of it. We're spending all the money. But I don't know. It has to do with money, and so people think that needs to happen in the House first.
That's the explainer. It's not raising it. It's spending it. Spending it can go anywhere.
It should. It really, and I don't know. Sometimes they occasionally get that wrong in the papers, and I don't know whether that's tradition or I've never found any real basis for spending bills starting in the House, except that maybe the Senate is lazy.
Right. Everybody wants to spend, but only the House can raise. Okay, I get that. So, what's going on with all of this? And is it going to be signed? And what happens? Everything that we told you at the beginning of the week appears to be true. Nobody wanted to shut down, and Trump will wind up signing it, and then he'll claim he's going to do some other executive thing short of a national emergency in order to get money to do something. So I just wanted to put a little bit of this in perspective. Yeah. And the first piece I wanted to cite here is from Philip Bump, who's writing in the Washington Post. Nearly half of Republicans think God wanted Trump to be president, and more than half of white evangelical Protestants agree. I am starting with this because I want to emphasize the fact that Trump's base is white evangelical Protestants.
Yes, well, so it would appear.
Right?
It's weird. Makes it sound like there's two separate groups out there that like him, and there aren't.
They're not that different. This all comes from a Fox News poll. Remember, Fox News is a legit poll that polls everybody, not just Fox News viewers. It's not one of those online polls. Do you believe God wanted Donald Trump to become president of all registered voters? Yes, 25, no, 62, okay. Unsure, 14. That means that 25% is really his core. And that's about right. That's about what Nixon had when he resigned. Okay. So you have a group of people who just are not going to be swayed by anything. These are not people you want to try to engage in discussion with about policy.
Wow. I certainly wouldn't, and this seals it.
Right? Only 3 in 10 evangelicals said categorically they didn't think Trump had God's explicit support. So basically, if you're talking to an evangelical, find out first where they stand on that before you go any further.
Yeah, that's interesting. Or maybe they just think it has to be written in some way or carved in stone tablets.
But must have been written some time ago, exactly. Party identification of white evangelical Protestants clearly has been since 2009, when it was in the 60s, is now well over 75% identifying as Republican. Very few identify as Democrats. And so this raises the bigger issue of what the heck is Trump doing?
Yeah, what the heck is Trump
doing? And why am I talking about this now? Because as he loses on the wall, he's going to turn to apocalyptic discussions of what will happen if he doesn't win. James Hellman has a good story about that in the Daily 202 today. But also, as he did, in the State of the Union, he's going to talk about horrible baby-killing, abortion-type stuff and other things that are going to appeal to that portion of the base who thinks he was sent by God.
Yes.
Basically, that's all he has left.
Okay.
So he's going to do kind of a twofer. He's going to paint the Democrats as radical socialists who are going to steal your car. I think Tom Cotton said this, steal your cars and prevent you from flying if they're elected, while at the same time accusing the Democrats of infanticide and do other things to try to shore up that evangelical base. And what I'm saying is, having lost on the wall,
yes,
now at last is the presidential pivot. And it's going to pivot away from xenophobia and racism to the issues that evangelicals care most about, which is abortion. And, at the same time, socialism in terms of the Democrats. So that's the pivot you're going to be looking for. And that's the background to all of this. Why is this going to happen? Well, here's a headline from February 12th from the LA Times, which is exactly what Trump doesn't want to see. Finish the wall? Facing failure, Trump tries rebranding.
All right.
Right? That's why he said finish the wall, not build the wall.
Oh, right. Okay.
It failed, right? And he couldn't do it. So he's going to try some rhetorical tricks to say, you see, this is Pee Wee Herman falling off the bike saying, see, I meant to do that. Right? So Leanne Caldwell, who is an NBC Capitol Hill reporter, has a nice, really short 2 or 3 tweet summary here. A little perspective on the border security deal. $1.375 billion is less than the $1.6 billion Senate appropriators agreed to in June of 2018.
Yes.
And that's what the administration originally requested, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So back in June of 2018, they sort of had semi-agreement about what they were going to do.
Yeah. At
so
one point.
After Trump started demanding $5.7 billion, and this is a good primer of how Trump negotiates. So they agreed to that. They agreed to the number that the administration had asked for, and then Trump said, no, I want $5.7 billion.
Yes, right. Okay.
And then Schumer started the negotiation with the Senate number, $1.6 billion.
Right.
All right. And then when things escalated, Schumer dropped the bid to $1.3 billion, and Trump stated $5.7.
Yes.
And then as things went on, Trump stated 5.7, and the final number is 1.37. Congratulations, Donald. That was a wonderful negotiation.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are restrictions in the bill as to the type of border structures that can be used.
Yes.
No new Trump prototypes are permitted. It has to be fencing that's been used pre-Trump. That's part of the language.
We'll see whether they obey that.
Okay. So it took a 35-day shutdown to get less money than the Senate was willing to give a year ago.
Okay.
And that's what he got for all of his trouble.
Good job.
Right?
It's a good thing he doesn't, rely on being a deal maker.
Negotiate for a living or something like that, right?
Right.
So that's the bottom line there. Nobody wanted to shut down. He failed. This was a defeat. And, of course, the Republicans are trying in public to put the best possible face on it. Senator Kennedy, who is, in my view, is no replacement for the original Senator Kennedy or Senator Kennedy's, wound up saying that Senator Kennedy from Louisiana said, oh, look how we won. Pelosi said we're getting $0 for the wall and we get $1.37 billion. We win.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, fine. Take that win to the bank. Meanwhile,
they can.
tell the American people you won and see if they believe you.
Meanwhile,
they don't.
Oh, well, some don't. Most all.
Most don't. And while Trump is trying to convince the American people he won on the wall,
yes,
new data from YouGov shows that it is pretty clear, G. Elliott Morris posts this, Americans are souring on Trump's tax plan as more and more are filing the 2018 tax returns. And as they file those returns, the opinion about whether or not you support or oppose this tax change, opposition is climbing.
Yes.
And it's being taken away from the no opinion group. It used to be that all three were the same. A third supported, a third opposed, and a third had no opinion. Well, that no opinion is dropping.
Okay.
And it's all going into the opposed column.
Well, they need to interview richer people.
Yeah, I guess. So, again, the backdrop is I'm already not liking everything else that's going on, and now you're trying to tell me this piece of BS, and it's just not going to fly.
Okay. Well, I guess not.
Okay.
Now what?
So that's what's happening with the wall. So the process, I guess, will be Senate votes tonight and then the House, and then we're done because Trump will sign it and then make noise.
Okay.
And you could see the online, as you were pointing out, part of this, I think, is a nice piece in Vice News here. I love the headline. Life is a living hell for conservatives in Pelosi's Washington. Right.
Yes.
This is again part of the background for all of this.
I wish it was a real hell, but okay, we'll take what we can get.
Well, I'll have to go back to that. How you feel about God and Trump? Well, the discussion isn't about God and Trump. It's about hell and conservatives. Come on, you didn't ask the right question.
That's what
conservatives in Congress hate the proposed bipartisan spending bill to keep the government open, but they're surrendering and paving the way for Trump to sign it. The deal, remember, this is a cave. Trump has lost. There is no other way to paint it. The deal, which funds a mere 55 miles of border fence and gives the Trump administration fewer beds than it wanted to detain undocumented immigrants, which is the whole bed cap thing. Forget about the numbers. The whole point is allowing ICE to do whatever they want versus not. And administration didn't get everything they wanted there. And it's no better than the deal Republicans could have had back in December before they shut down the government for 35 days, which everybody keeps reminding Trump, you did this big negotiation, put people through hell, and you lost. What was the point, as we talked about yesterday? The point was for him to be able to distance himself from the deal and say, I didn't do it, the Congress did it. So I'll do what I can because, again, he's terrified of losing his base because everybody else hates him. But besides dealing a defeat to Trump, the agreement is forcing conservatives in Congress, particularly the once high-flying Freedom Caucus, to get used to a greatly diminished role in Washington. And although that's what the piece says, you can also read this as it's also forcing the press, the media, to take a greatly diminished look at the Freedom Caucus. Right? They can't just come out and then everybody surrounds them with microphones because they're interested in what they say. What they say doesn't matter. They're learning that. We've talked about this on the show for years, why you never, ever, ever want to be in the minority in the House.
Yeah.
And that's what this article is highlighting. We don't have leverage in this particular issue because it obviously is going to be Democrat-led, said Mark Meadows. And I think the president will sign it. I think he'll do so reluctantly and then obviously have to use executive actions to secure our border, said Meadows, who contends that Trump has plenty of cash. So they have their own, sort of worldview. Like Meadows, most conservatives oppose the new numbers that a bipartisan group of top appropriators have agreed to, but they didn't capitalize appropriators. So I don't know if it's an official article here. But they're basically conceding that they've been checkmated. There's just not much they can do to stop it. I think we've sort of passed the point where we had leverage, said Representative Thomas Massey, Republican Kentucky, a Republican with strong libertarian leanings. Massey, who has refused to join the House Freedom Caucus, must be a backstory there, but often votes with them, says he sees the new dynamic himself, but notices it's only slowly sinking in for other conservatives across Capitol Hill, and I would add, and of course the press who covers them. They're still sort of pretending we have the same sort of leverage. I think it disappeared.
Yes.
The thing I like about Congress is that they're like up on everything.
It wasn't really so much of a disappearance.
Up to the minute politics,
Yes, it was taken away from you.
Yeah, February 14th, Valentine's Day, and they just figured out that they don't have leverage.
Oops. Well, they were busy since the beginning of the year. Most of the time the government was shut, and now they got time to read.
On the other hand, my senator has a different view. If this is where we end up, it makes the shutdown even look stupider and even more malevolent, a frustrated Senator Chris Murphy told Vice News.
Yeah.
But the more the president listens to the conservative talking heads who hate this compromise on the long-promised wall, like Ann Coulter and Sean Hannity, the more imperiled the deal becomes because, like, he hasn't signed it just yet.
Right. Yeah, although Sean Hannity on the other side this time. But I don't think Coulter ever came around, and I don't know whether he knows who
never did.
The other one is, Tomi Lahren.
Tomi Lahren, yeah. She's on Fox News, so he knows who it is.
Yeah, all right. I mean,
Durbin's still holding out hope that Dick Durbin will realize what even members of the Freedom Caucus are now admitting. I hope he learned a lesson that the shutdown of 35 days harmed a lot of innocent people and ended up with a mutiny in the ranks on the Republican side, which it did.
Yeah, that last part he might have taken note of. I don't think he registered with him that innocent people were hurt. That doesn't matter.
Right. So let's see. New York Times reports Brandon Wall tweeted this. He's the lead curation editor for BuzzFeed News. And John Stanton, who used to work for BuzzFeed News, tweeted this. Brandon Wall says, New York Times reports Trump is calling Lou Dobbs and Hannity to justify the spending bill without money for the wall.
Right.
And Stanton saw that and said, the president of the United States, who has control of a nuclear arsenal, mind you, is calling a sentient sack of liposuction fat, that would be Lou Dobbs, and a racist pile of hair, that would be Hannity,
I see.
Because he's worried they may be mad at him for keeping the government open.
Yes. How
did these two clowns become so important that anyone without an 88 tattoo on their face would care what they think?
Telly.
Yeah. Like, sure, yeah, you're a high-level Klansman, or the singer for Screwdriver. That's Screwdriver with a K. I get it. But like anybody else, Jesus, you need some new friends.
Stuck in the 80s. So.
Right? So, again, that's the background for all of this. So what's happening is, as part of the big theme here, the evangelicals are ascendant. The xenophobes are losing. They're going to try to make a comeback by trying to pick on people like, Alexandria Ocasio and some of the freshman Democrats and try to make them boogeymen. And they're going to give up on trying to make Nancy Pelosi the face of the Democratic Party because that didn't work out so well for them. Not only did they lose, but everything that's happened since that election has elevated Pelosi. and highlighting the fact that they have a really, truly effective speaker who can actually control her own side, let alone get things through the House and, go toe-to-toe with the president on negotiations and win, is not necessarily something that they want to elevate.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I did see about the thing, and I guess they've now shifted, and I don't know whether they've given up on the Pelosi thing, but now they have other women Democrats to attack, and they think that one will work much better.
Yeah, besides, some of them are women of color, so even more so.
So much more exciting for them. They enjoy it a lot more. I don't know whether they've given up on Pelosi, but, it's 15, 16 tries might have convinced them that it wasn't going to work, or maybe they just were excited about the possibility of beating up on someone younger and browner.
Well, so again, just to emphasize the point, the House passed a measure to end U.S. military involvement in Yemen.
Yes. Yeah, man.
So, the Freedom Caucus really has lost control of the House, and they are upset about it. After the break, we're going to talk about Paul Manafort and what's going on with the Russia probe. We're going to talk about Representative Ilhan Omar and her discussions, her polite discussion with Elliot Abrams.
That was a good one.
And then maybe a little bit of measles. But before the break, I wanted to highlight an ad I saw as I was hunting for stories for today.
Yes.
I clicked on a CNN story, and the banner headline, the banner ad at the top, which I put at the top of the Skype list I gave you, is from the AARP, directed at seniors. It says, it's Valentine's Day today. It says, protect your heart and your money. Avoid online romance scams.
Oh. Well, okay. AARP on your side.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
Wow, okay. Well, recognizing some sort of interesting trend that I will not delve into. But
right, exactly. But it's there for a reason. That's all I
think about it. Okay, we'll be back in 2 minutes. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7, for which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against that. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now, that's not all on you. But remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm still looking for a bill number on the border security funding deal, et cetera, and I can't find a report. I'm half-heartedly flipping through things while I'm listening to Greg here, but and I can't pay that much attention to it. I'd rather talk to him, but I'm hoping that somebody will. Yeah, I'm trying to pay attention to you, but I'm flipping through, say, all right, somebody give me a bill number so I can look it up and give everybody a rundown on how the procedure went and why is it going here and there. We'll try it again afterwards and maybe do all the research here online, but I think people have avoided reporting on it because they don't get it. I think sometimes the reporters don't know exactly what happened, and also editors don't care. They just say, hand wave, blah, blah, blah. Congress is doing it, so it must be official. So just look, I don't know. They're going to vote today, and these are the papers. Look at them. Here's a picture.
There's a stack of them.
Yeah, and I think that's about all they're able to manage.
And the funny thing is, if those papers, like the middle section, were completely blank, or if they had, I don't know, the New York Yankees roster from 1981 buried in, nobody would know.
Why not? Right? Some of them might know. Call Chris Chambliss. Would he know?
Yeah, exactly. So the CNN piece that I took that banner ad warning AARP people to stay away from online romance scams.
Yeah.
The actual article was Manafort bombshell deepens mystery in Russia probe, which is to say that Manafort, a judge ruled yesterday, really did lie to Mueller's team, and Mueller got that on record in court papers.
Aha.
Paul Manafort's latest legal debacle deepened the core intrigue underlying special counsel Robert Mueller's probe. Why have so many of President Donald Trump's associates been caught lying about contacts with Russians?
Because they speak.
Yeah. In a significant new twist, they speak in rubles. In a significant new twist in the 2016 election saga, a judge ruled Wednesday that Trump's ex-campaign chairman intentionally lied to investigators, breaking a deal he had reached as a cooperating witness. The lies, including about meetings with a suspected Russian intelligence asset, were about issues intimately linked to Mueller's wider inquiry, which includes a look into whether there were any links or coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian election interference effort. And it goes over how Team Trump has changed its story over time. But this is an interesting overview that David Rothkopf put together in a tweet storm. He says, the chairman and vice chairman of Trump's campaign met with a Russian agent, an emissary of the Kremlin, to discuss a secret deal for a Ukraine deal and give him confidential campaign data, days after Trump asked for Russian help and sold the Russian line in Ukraine.
Okay.
They did it in a building owned by the president's son-in-law. That's where that...
the cigar bar is in...
Cigar bar is in 666 Fifth Avenue or Park Avenue or whichever one it was. I keep forgetting.
Oh, yeah, right. Fifth, I think.
Yeah. They hid it at the time by exiting through separate entrances. They lied about it repeatedly. The campaign manager put his freedom for the rest of his life on the line to lie about it.
Oh. So
they kept working this issue into 2018. Take this alone. Set it apart from the 100 other meetings Trump senior team members had with Russians and the president's record of catering to Russia. Set it apart from the ongoing, often lied about plan to build the Trump-Moscow Tower. These facts alone, future legal proceedings aside, disqualify Trump from the office he holds and sends a message to history that his campaign and his presidency were tainted by the worst betrayal by the president of the republic in our history. Which is, I suppose Jeff Davis might have a claim on that, but, you can argue about which republic he really represented.
Well, let's go back to Richard Burr's old ancestor, Aaron. He's certainly guilty of the same.
But he wasn't president.
Right, but he was vice president. That's something. And Jefferson Davis was not. We don't count him as a president.
Yeah, we really don't.
Not.
Oh, you're in Virginia, so I just had to.
Believe me, I didn't vote for the guy.
I had to see what Virginians feel about that. I mean, you've got a whole street dedicated to.
There is a highway. I don't know why, but there you go.
And of course, as just noted, Rothkopf writes, these aren't all the facts. There's much more hinted at in legal documents. We're about to embark on congressional hearings that will reveal the president's financial dealings that have profoundly compromised him. We'll see the trial of Roger Stone and likely that of the president's son and other close to him for not only lying but conspiring against the U.S. with the Russians, WikiLeaks, and others. The case against Donald Trump will grow more and more compelling, but it already reveals him as a traitor to every value we expect of even the most minor figure in our government, of every citizen, much less the commander-in-chief. It's a violation of his oath of office, of the trust all, including those who support him, have placed in him. Every day he remains in office is a travesty and a threat. We need to see what is right before our eyes, accept the evidence, and defend the country against the usurpers who occupy the White House. So that's a point of view.
Yes, it's a travesty. It's two travesties: sham and a mockery. And
a sham and a mockery, exactly right.
Wow. Okay.
Anyway, so while this is going on Wednesday, that would be yesterday, there were hearings in Congress. And Elliot Abrams, President Donald Trump's new special envoy to Venezuela.
Oh, brand new. Yeah, he's never, who knows never this guy from out of nowhere.
Who knew who he was, right? At a heated House Foreign Affairs subcommittee hearing about the crisis in South America going on with Venezuela.
No, there's a crisis there too? Wow.
So Representative Ilhan Omar and Abrams had the testy exchange after she questioned his truthfulness.
Wow, dear.
Mr. Adams, she got that wrong. It's Mr. Abrams.
Oh.
Calling Abrams by an incorrect name. In 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony you give today to be truthful. That's a nice thing to say to somebody. He's probably never had that said to him.
Good morning. Not by anybody who mattered.
Right. Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day. You're a thief and a liar.
Well.
When Abrams tried to respond, Omar interrupted him, saying it wasn't a question, to which the diplomat countered, it was an attack. It's not right members of this committee can attack a witness who is not permitted to reply. I guess what she gets to say is, I'm reclaiming my time.
Yeah, that's right.
And Omar kept going, bringing up the 1982 hearing in which Abrams, then Reagan's Assistant Secretary of State for Human Rights, testified about the El Mozote massacre in El Salvador. During that country's civil war, tensions grew. In the hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda a report that about the massacre of El Mozote, of which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S. trained troops, she said. You later said the U.S. policy in Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no? Do you still think so? Abrams responded by crediting the Reagan administration for that country's movement toward democracy, calling it a fabulous achievement. But yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch? That's a ridiculous question, Abrams replied. Yes or no? I will take that as a yes. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question. Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide if you believe they were serving U.S. interests, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua? I'm not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry, I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, so I will not reply. Omar then said, does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and including protecting people against genocide? That is always the position of the United States, Abrams said, and that's where this piece ends. So that was a pretty fascinating exchange. Those guys are not used to this. No. And to highlight this, I have a now blocked, that is to say, I can read it because we follow each other. But if you don't follow her, you're blocked from reading it.
Okay. She has a private account? Locked?
She has a private account. It wasn't private until last night.
Oh, all right. From who?
From Lauren DeJong Schulman.
All right, too late for me.
Who is, I screen captured it, however, and put it on the list there so you can take a peek at what it looks like.
Gotcha.
So she's ex-NatSec, and she's tweeting in a personal capacity.
Very personal now.
And she starts out by saying, I'm continuing my Twitter grave digging, and this isn't a violation of anything because it was all public when I read it last night. The U.S. foreign policy community is poorly equipped to cope with individual and community failures.
That is true.
Individuals are, for reasons good and bad, rarely made to pay a price for their foreign policy harms and errors. Sometimes I think this is good. Foreign policy is a series of guesses, and you bet wrong a lot. You follow blindly. You have too much hope or cynicism. You F up.
All policy.
Right? But, and it's very hard to pin catastrophes of foreign policies on individuals, or at least it was. That's changing. I would add, see Henry Kissinger. But still, I look at my colleagues with Iraq, Libya, Katrina in their resumes, including me. Do I want to discard them for doing their best in a terrible policy? Should we? We usually in the foreign policy world just accept that it's part of the career. What we don't do much is own it and talk about it. Senior professionals don't stand up and say, I did that wrong. Junior pros don't say, I wish I'd understood what that was. I would have stepped away. We avoid our foreign policy mistakes. It's a horrible flaw of the field. Now, people like to say the military is good at lessons learned, and I say that is true, sometimes tactically when it wants to be. The civilian counterparts are rarely assessed in the same way. Both avoid strategic ownership. I think we'd be better and wiser as a field if we talk more openly about horrors we worry we contributed to, because we will, even in the best, most perfect policy and administration, and assumptions we got wrong, resources we wasted, and leaders we stupidly trusted. And, of course, I will add, denial is more than a river in Egypt.
Yes. Well, I find that she's largely correct. I don't know why she limits it to foreign policy. I guess that's all she knows.
That's her area of expertise, and she's specifically talking about the Abrams Omar discussion.
Yeah, I would say it's probably true of all policy. But okay, yeah, foreign policy is one of them. So yes, you're right. And that's true. And you'd think that it's funny because when you're talking about the criteria by which you or the media in general or whoever selects who is serious enough to be paid attention to about anything. There's a hierarchy. You have to have a suit. That definitely helps. If you're white, that's fantastic. That's even better.
If your name is Max Boot, it's great.
Yeah, right. That's if you have a funky hat, right? Whatever it is that you need to pass muster. But the hierarchy of policymakers, there's something about foreign policy credentials that's supposed to make you even more serious than domestic policy credentials somehow. I'm not certain why that is. It just seems like traditionally a more serious, even-handed, and maybe because diplomacy, because they're diplomats.
Yeah, and diplomats don't criticize each other.
But then they don't criticize themselves either, and that's
right. And that's a point of her whole piece here. Yeah. So now an outsider comes in and confronts Abrams and says, "You're responsible for genocide." And he said, "That's incredibly rude. You shouldn't say stuff like that to me. I reject your question."
Well, too bad. And another good point made this morning, which I think bears on this one. I think Ryan Graham actually tweeting this one, pointing out that, Elliot Abrams's policy decisions are responsible for the continuation of collapsing and failed states all over Central America, which the result of which is people are in panic and migrating constantly to the United States in the hopes of finding someplace where they can live stably and outside of the threat of these killer gangs that he set loose.
So, in other words, he's personally responsible for the refugee situation for which we're having a fight about a border wall.
Including the refugee situation. I mean, he's not, I guess he was a Central America thing, but his team and the people who make this policy in every administration since then, I mean, they're equally responsible for the Somali refugee population that lives here in the United States now, too. And here they are now, members of Congress. And they would like to know about the sort of mistakes. When are we going to have an accounting for the sort of mistakes that bring people like me here to the United States, eventually to Congress, and handed the right constitutionally to ask you this kind of a question? And Elliot Abrams says, no, you're still not allowed.
Right. You're still not there. I don't accept you as a peer or somebody who is in the situation of oversight of me.
Right.
Who are you to question me?
Right. And so that's where you take out the little pocket constitution and wave it. It works for Republicans,
you say,
but
here's
not
how
for
it works.
Democrats.
So Lauren DeJong-Scholin continues, a notable point from a response. My peers have felt and are given culpability as much for inaction as they are for their own actions. Mm-hmm. This is unfair, perhaps, and unsatisfying, but it's true. A kernel of truth there about the Benghazi situation with Secretary of State Clinton. Mm-hmm. She was culpable because why didn't you do more?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that is the overall framework that the whole Benghazi nonsense was put in place over.
Yes.
It's not that it was up to her to decide, how that went, but the grounds of criticism was you should have done more.
Yes.
And that is like a constant. Whatever you did, I get if you did it and it all went horribly wrong, but what if you didn't do anything? That would have been horrible.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, it only works in favor of Republicans and never for Democrats somehow. But yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic that she points up here. Not only the lack of self-awareness and self-criticism, but like Abrams, disallowing anybody else. The elected people who actually, that's a really amazing dynamic. The electeds are no longer allowed to question the unelecteds when they screw things up.
Yeah. That's like that historian going to Davos and telling them that they're really screwing things up with the world.
Yeah,
they get really upset about that.
Yeah.
Now she goes on to say, "Listen, something I'm attempting to convey is the self-awareness, limitations, and protectiveness of the foreign policy community as a whole. I'm not suggesting it's good. I'm suggesting it's real and very related to the dynamic I'm trying to explain here. Okay. Naming the elephant, it is correct to say Abrams was a X." Whatever, fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. He was. But unseen and unnamed are the dozens around Abrams who helped draft the memo, who got him coffee, who stayed quiet in a meeting. Later, Abrams didn't wear a badge that said, "If I did it, it's black and white and complicated." Absolving or condemning Abrams is briefly satisfying but overly simplistic. What's wrong with the foreign policy field is that we see Abrams return repeatedly and have no resolution of actions he took decades ago. No, actually, I don't endorse, propose, or enjoy war crimes. And I can't believe I'm tweeting this. The foreign policy community has problems. I'm describing it. It should change. This is where she starts getting attacked and when she made it private. Mm-hmm. Things I've learned: don't write a thread identifying a problem unless you say in every tweet you don't believe what you're describing. You say in every tweet that you believe what you're describing is bad.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Right? Many, 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 many people really despise the foreign policy community a lot, loudly, yes, with fervor.
Right, true.
And what I've learned from this tweet is don't have open DMs, don't say complex things, and retire.
Yeah, well, that's all true.
So
why would you have open DMs?
It was just an interesting perspective here because it's very difficult to remember that Abrams is just a representative of a whole team of people who did this. It wasn't just him. It wasn't just Henry Kissinger.
Yeah, right. There were lots of pardons.
There's the face of it, which people rightly call to task. I mean, that's one of the deals. If you're going to be that prominent, then, you know, with the power comes the responsibility and also, right, you know, the oversight and the criticism.
And if you're going to
But there were plenty of other people, you don't even know who they are. They never get criticized, and they never criticize themselves, and they continue to work, and they keep coming back. And there's a good part to that so that you could do your job, and there's a bad part to that because where is the hot wash, the after-action report that goes over what you did to see whether or not you could do better? At CDC and in the health field, we do that all the time.
True.
Where are these people doing it, and why isn't it more public?
Well, they may
in
be
fact,
doing
if you try
it.
to do that, you get arrested, you know, like the Pentagon Papers.
Yes, that's true. They may be producing the papers. They're just.
But if you make them public, you get hauled off to jail or whatever.
That's a part of
court,
the same dynamic of pointing out that, you know, people need to be able to do their job even if they do it poorly or wrong. But you know, so sometimes those things need to stay confidential, I suppose.
In the medical field, we go out of our way to try to make these systems issues discussions. It's not a person. What about the system allowed us to do this? If Abrams recommended genocide, where's the system in place to correct that, to say that, no, you can't just go ahead and do that? What's the system's analysis of how it came to be that genocide happened, rather than it's Abrams' fault? That part I totally get, and that's part of what she's trying to say.
Well,
that is how other, life and death professions like medicine do this sort of thing. Because if you make it entirely on the back of the individual, everybody will just jump out a window, and that doesn't leave you. You know, because nobody wants to be responsible for genocide. Nobody wants to feel like they were the one responsible for a massacre or anything like that. Yeah, I know you should make better decisions so that doesn't happen, but that's not the point. People are human. They do make errors. What's the system in place to protect from that, to correct that, and to make sure it doesn't happen again? And foreign policy appears to lack all of that. So they're like two decades
one
behind.
way is to have former refugees then elected to Congress and endowed with these powers allowed to ask the questions and get a straight answer.
It is a good corrective. And so in that sense, rather than try to rally around Elliot Abrams, which you see the foreign policy community doing on Twitter and elsewhere, it's actually good to support Omar's questions because they're reasonable and part of the solution.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you only think of this thing after the fact. You know, I just thought of the exact right response I should have given. You know, that happens to everybody afterwards. But, I mean, maybe that's the next round of questioning for him is like, you know, this is, by the way, this is your third administration that you're serving here. And we're asking you about what you've done in the past, and you don't think it's a reasonable line of questioning, and everybody's lining up behind you to support you. But you know, I guess I know you feel like it's unfair, but here's what I feel like is unfair. You were pardoned for those crimes. You have no excuse for not answering. Just as you in a court, you wouldn't be able to plead the Fifth Amendment for something about which for which you faced no legal jeopardy. You've been pardoned. just tell us what the hell went wrong, please.
Right.
How we
or
got
you
the
can
genocide.
be nicer and, more what's the word? You can be more process oriented about it. You could say, I'm not here to attack you for being a convicted felon. I simply want to know what the process is by which your decisions were reviewed by the foreign policy community to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Just answer that.
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. And you might say, I only bring up the fact that you're a convicted felon in order to get around to the fact that you were pardoned for it, and so you don't face any legal jeopardy in answering these questions now. The Fifth Amendment wouldn't be available to you.
That's not a personal attack. It's a point of order.
In fact, congratulations, you've been pardoned. It's not only a personal attack, it's a message of congratulations.
We welcome you back to respectable society. Can you please explain to us what steps were taken to make sure that the things that led to you being a convicted felon does not happen again?
Right, because we don't want to have to expel you from polite society again.
In sorrow and not in anger. We don't want to do that. So just explain to us what the mechanism is so that doesn't happen.
It's not happening.
That's not a personal
genocide.
Attack.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but that's the language that people learn eventually in Congress how to use. My colleague who I hold, my esteemed colleague whom I hold in minimal high regard, etc. Right, my good friend from, whatever. Yeah. Well, these are things that come with a little bit of experience. Although, I'm sure the emotion is a little raw. If you were a refugee, maybe it would take 6 to 10 minutes to develop that sense.
That's right. And I just want to ask my good friend and colleague, who in fact was never convicted of eating that puppy.
Right. Exactly. So, okay, these are skills that people will pick up over time. She's not wrong.
She's not wrong. But that's the gist of where that whole confrontation came from. And I just wanted to – I know we spent a lot of time on it, but I think it's important to make the point that it was a lot more than just being rude on one side or the other side.
Yes, okay. And I think so. And it's unfortunate. It could very easily be dismissed that way, and maybe because she was already in trouble for other things. But that's why they try to get you in trouble, so they can diminish everything else and minimize your impact and every other thing. The fact that we have a Somali refugee in Congress is a gift, and we should be listening a little more closely. And I think forgiving a couple of transgressions. The whole point of having someone like this in Congress, and having someone like this in Congress, the whole point is that there's so much that we could be learning in a much more interesting perspective than 99% of the rest of the Congress is able to bring to bear on these things. This is a good opportunity, and I resent anyone trying to waste it.
There you go. Anyway, so that's my summary for today. The other day we talked about that simulator, which doesn't work on radio, for seeing how easily measles can be spread.
Oh, that simulator.
But for your viewers and for your readers who read the summary later on at the Daily Kos, I have this nice piece by Helen Branswell, health science reporter, about the tricks that make measles so infectious. And to give you a much easier idea to hear verbally, back in the days before measles vaccine was widely used, it was estimated that one child with measles would infect between 12 and 18 other children on average. We're talking about children here deliberately. Measles spread so efficiently that before measles vaccine was introduced in the 60s, very few people made it to adulthood without having contracted the disease. The rate of spread is very high, and what makes it so effective? You don't have to be exposed to a lot of the virus, so it's very efficient. And from a containment point of view, it's a bad combo to have people who emit a lot of virus, but it's easy to catch. So Mike Osterholm over at the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at University of Minnesota, otherwise known as CIDRAP, who I've worked with, measles make an infected child into a viral oozy.
No.
Right? He talks about the fact that you can go to a stadium, somebody can cough, and if you are 100 yards away in an upper tier, the measles virus goes in the air and you can catch it. And that happens. Wow. So you can go to an open stadium or Disneyland or Disney World and catch it from somebody who happens to pass by you if you happen to be vulnerable.
Good.
So it's important to get your vaccine. And the people like Bill Shine's wife,
yes,
who were broadcasting the fact that vaccines are stupid and it's better to get measles because that way it protects you from cancer and other stupid things that they were saying on the internet yesterday, really need to be condemned. And people have to pay much, much more attention to the fact that measles was wiped out in this country until we had anti-vaxxers who decided that they wanted to expose your kids to this potentially lethal infection.
Yes. Well, she was so sure of herself because, of course, there are still people. And once there were both measles and people, and now there are still people, so measles can't be that bad. Look at all the people who survived measles. You can see that they're super strong because there's lots of people, no cancer, and also no measles, except for a lot of it.
Right. So to take you right to the end of the hour and your short break, I again also don't want to forget and acknowledge the fact that this is a Parkland anniversary today.
Yes. Right.
And, folks like me from Newtown totally get what it's like that next year. It's just really, really tough today for them. So
yes, absolutely. Can't really, all we can do at this point is just make mention of it and take note of how people are remembering. There's no expression of concern and sorrow that's good enough. We'll just let them do it.
Right, but the House, on the other hand, is working on background check legislation.
That will help.
I guess it got through committee.
Yes.
And one of the committee members is herself somebody who lost her son to gun violence. So, karma comes around, goes around, all that sort of stuff. Right. So with that, I'll leave you for the break.
Okay.
This is Greg Dworkin speaking to my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning, who has a whole hour of show left after the music.
Yeah.
Come back and listen, and I will talk to you on Monday.
All right, very good. Thanks, Greg. Carried through an entire hour. I appreciate it. We'll check in with you again on Monday. I thought when you were going to bring up the simulation, it was going to be the golf simulator, but measles instead.
Well, the golf courses, I guess, are in Pennsylvania and Ohio, right, and other important places to him.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And let's see, how shall we continue on with all this? The golf simulator. I didn't get to that story. It's not a huge story. It's a huge simulator and a huge president playing with this huge simulator. But David Farenthold's groundbreaking. I mean, I'm not criticizing it or anything. I just think it's kind of funny. It's a funny story. His story yesterday ran in the Post. Alongside Josh Dawsey, also reporting with him on this one. President Trump installed a room-sized golf simulator at the White House. And I don't know exactly. I don't know what room it is. So it makes a difference in the White House. There's some large rooms in there. And I guess that was what helped him get through the difficult period of not going to his golf resorts during the shutdown. And the story notes that, in fact, there was as they say, a less sophisticated simulator system already installed in the White House, which had been installed by President Obama, which I guess is what Trump supporters will lean on in order to pretend that this thing isn't such a stupid story. And it works partially. President Trump has installed a room-sized golf simulator game at the White House, which allows him to play virtual rounds at courses all over the world by hitting a ball into a large video screen, according to two people told about the system. You may have seen something like this. I think they have them at, sporting goods stores where they sell a lot of golf clubs, not just golf specialty places, but I've seen them, I think even near me, the Dick's Sporting Goods which has a big golf section, has got one of these things. And, there's cameras and, I don't know what, lasers, sharks with lasers on their heads swimming around. You hit the ball and it records the speed and the trajectory of the ball and the spin. And mathematically, you can use that to map out, well, where would this ball go? And you take video of famous courses around the world, or you can even generate new courses randomly, whatever. And based on how the ball flies into the screen, they're pretty much able to mathematically tell you where you would end up. And you get to play virtual golf, which I wonder whether he enjoys it. It says that he actually hasn't used it yet, but who knows whether that's accurate or not. But I don't know whether I can't guess whether he would like that better than regular golf. He might. He doesn't have to move or walk anywhere, or no one has to see whether he's any good or not, and he doesn't actually have to cheat so much. I wonder, it may even be that you can set the computer to allow you to cheat a little bit more. I'm not sure. But he doesn't have to get in and out of the cart. And that seems like, or talk to other people. I don't know whether he enjoys that more. I suppose he enjoys talking to his golfing partners and lying to them about things, and that's an element that's missing. Apparently, the system cost about $50,000, and it was installed during the last few weeks in a room in his personal quarters, which is, I guess, where I hope you would put it. I don't know where the older system exists. An official who spoke on the condition of anonymity, because who wants to talk about this on the record, says that Trump paid for the new system and the installation personally. And you know that's true because Trump loves paying for things personally, and the person who told us about it is safely anonymous. Generally speaking, we take that to mean that he did not pay for it personally. It may be that he didn't pay for it at all, and that someone donated it to him, and that story will come out later. I can't guarantee that that's the case. I'm just saying that tends to be the story after the fact when people really look into it with things like this. That is to say, things in which Donald Trump has had a hand. So, I don't know. Do you need to know any more about that? No, not really. He's got it. It says that he hasn't used it yet, and it also, they're trying to assure everyone, no, that's not what he's doing with his executive time, except nobody knows whether that's really true either. Just putting that out there because it seems like it would be from The Onion or something, and it's not. Anyway, let's see. I didn't get to the rest of the Tomi Lahren getting beat up over opposing the sham border deal thing, but just wanted to reiterate that the full story here is that when she said this was a terrible deal and he shouldn't take it and he's weak and he's caving in, the backlash was from Trump supporters who essentially tweeted, I don't know on what forum. Did she get on television to say this, or did she just tweet it? Their tweet is here. And I guess all the responses came on Twitter too, so it must have been originally there. Tomi Lahren's tweet, I'm not going to sugarcoat it if Donald Trump, using his Twitter handle, real Donald Trump, takes this sham border deal from the Democrats, he loses in 2020, and we all lose for years to come. I'll discuss on Fox and Friends in 10 minutes, and I guess she actually did do that. Trump supporters answered her on Twitter, because you can yell at the television, it's just she doesn't get to hear it. And so now you should be aware that people are willing to go out in public, that is to say on Twitter, and answer charges like that with responses like this. This random dude here says, ye of little faith, the wall is being built as we speak. American flag emoji, MAGA American flag emoji, just in case you... And that, of course, a line from Trump's own rally speeches, walls being built as we speak. Let's see. Kathy Gray tweeting, he has money to build the wall. $23 billion. Tweeted it last night or tonight. Of course, he doesn't have that money. There's nothing near that amount of money. But, Kathy's pretty sure there's a specific number that you can put on it. Montgomery Granger tweeting, Tomi, I get your spiel, and I'm down with it. But realize that Donald Trump is not a politician. Listen to what he says, that he is building the wall and has been since day one. He's about getting things done one way or the other. Support him. Trust him. And then hashtags including MAGA 2020, grit, and hooah, because one time that guy was in the military, so therefore he gets to hashtag that all the time. He may even still be there now. Who knows? Anyway, let's see. A couple of other responses. Give you just, I think you get the flavor of it. In fact, why even bother? I don't have to read you the rest of them. The point is that there's tweet after tweet after tweet here of people insisting you're wrong. He's building the wall now. He has been building the wall this whole time, too, which is even a step beyond the lie that he was encouraging people to take away from his speech. And that this is all part of the grand plan, and you're too stupid to realize that that's the case. So, I guess I don't mind watching them put her through the ringer. It's just, I guess, worth noting from time to time just how deluded people really are about this person and this issue. Just going to put that out there. All right. Let's see. Couple other issues we want to hit, and then maybe a few stories to read through. This I thought was an interesting and proper observation from Howard Dean, from whom we haven't heard in a little while. He's tweeting all the time, of course, and some of the things he tweets make us say, oh my God, Howard Dean, what are you talking about? What's wrong with you? And some of them, not so much, and we're happier to repeat. Like this one here, in response to a Talking Points memo article and tweet, noting that Trump spotted Senator Chris Coons at the, in the White House at some point. Is that right? And screams at him about abortion. And I thought that this was, I thought that the idea was that this had taken place at the National Prayer Breakfast. And is that right? Yeah, I guess it did, because the prayer breakfast took place at the White House's, in the White House, in the Blue Room, which, in case you want to know what room it is, that's, I guess, not where the golf simulator is. That narrows things down a little bit. That's the, I don't know what to tell you. He's on an abortion rampage, of course, and that has to do with the story that Greg brought up in the beginning of his trying to shore himself up with evangelicals. And I guess the coin of the realm here in this stuff is they got some sort of distorted read out of what happened in Virginia, and it's all tied up with, in a way, with Ralph Northam and what's going on here. And essentially, in a nutshell, some consideration of rewriting the laws on access to abortion in Virginia that conservatives thought they would be wise to, as they frequently do, misconstrue on purpose and say essentially, like we were noting the other day, they finally got around to taking a position in screaming about abortion that we all joked they would eventually end up on, accusing Democrats of allowing abortion even after birth and maybe up to age 19, whatever. And we now are at the point where, honest to God, the President of the United States, apparently, that's what they call him, the President of the United States gets on television and in front of crowds and says things like this. Do you know that in Virginia they're allowing abortion even after the child is born? Murdering babies. They're just executing the babies. We talked about this the other day. And he's sure he's got a political winner there because, gosh, who would agree with executing babies? Of course, no one, and so that's not really true. But that's the nugget that he's taken away from this thing. And it was, I say it was tied up with what's happening in around with the rest of Ralph Northam's career, because it was hinted early on in his blackface scandal that the Republicans were finally spilling this dirt on him because they were angry at him about the abortion debate that was going on. And I don't know how true that is, but that's the story that's circulating. So here, TPM reporting that they have the National Prayer Breakfast going on in the White House, and Trump got in Chris Coons's face, it says, in his face, about the abortion issue currently being debated in New York and Virginia. which, Chris Coons is from Delaware. So why do you get in his face? And the answer is because he's a Democrat and he showed up at the National Prayer Breakfast, which really gets to Howard Dean's actual point about this, which is, what are you doing going to the National Prayer Breakfast at this point? He says, Howard Dean says, the National Prayer Breakfast has become a partisan event for the right wing. Why would people of faith who believe in social justice bother to attend? And it is a good question, and people like Chris Coons ought to take it under consideration. In fact, though, honestly, he should have taken it under consideration last year and not showed up this time. Now you can say, all right, well, now you have the experience of having been attacked on a partisan basis there, too. But before this happened, the National Prayer Breakfast had been exposed as a nest of spies. Why would you be involved in this? Maria Butina and her spy network had their tendrils woven into the National Prayer Breakfast. We knew this 6 months ago. Chris Coons had no business involving himself in it, but he's hanging on to the old time idea of the National Prayer Breakfast being some sort of safe space, I guess. And because they hate safe spaces and political correctness, Donald Trump wanted to go out of his way to prove, no, you can't pray with us because we hate you, because you're a Democrat. And that ought to be the end of Democratic participation in the event, quite honestly. But it won't be. We'll see whether Chris Coons takes this thing to heart. So there it is. He saw a Democrat in the room, a Democrat who's known to be a person of faith, which is why he likes to go to this thing, I guess. And he was like, why aren't you speaking about this? A source told Politico. Coons is a devout Presbyterian, which is something Donald Trump isn't. Devout. So I don't know. This story, normally I wouldn't really care that much, but it does make me angry to a certain extent that he goes to the National Prayer Breakfast and poses this way and pretends that he belongs there and that Chris Coons doesn't, although I would maintain that Chris Coons no longer belongs there either. But back in the day when you could be a person of faith and a Democrat, I suppose you could naively ignore everything that was going on at the National Prayer Breakfast and pretend you really still belong there. I hope this clears it up. I mean, of course, it won't change things. Chris Coons will probably continue to go there and say, well, no, it's Donald Trump that doesn't belong at these things. And that's true. He isn't wrong about that. But, well, when you have the National Prayer Breakfast at the White House, the president's going to show up. So, all right, if you're living under a president who can't resist the temptation to make the National Prayer Breakfast a partisan attack, then, yeah, don't go, I guess. Trump, who once called himself very pro-choice, of course, has turned to this issue to deflect from his myriad recent political losses, including a likely concession on the border wall, and some sources told Politico, due to a true growing conviction on the subject. I don't know whether that's really true. The White House has been trying to woo back evangelical voters, many of whom see abortion as the crowning political issue. New York and Virginia are considering allowing women to have late-term abortions if the labor would imperil their health in the former, New York, that is, and in the former, or mental and physical health in the latter, that being Virginia. Get it? That's just the language of the legislation under consideration in the two states. The state legislation is widely seen as a reaction to codify abortion rights under threat by a Trump-molded judiciary. So that's where that part of the controversy comes from. Anyway, Howard Dean, I think, making a good observation. You're not going to be allowed to participate in communities of faith, Democrats. You're not. And it's your right to do that. And so, I guess I'm torn a little bit. Like, why give in to that threat by showing up by refusing to go to the National Prayer Breakfast when Donald Trump is the one that really doesn't belong? I think you can actually make that argument with me, and I'll say, well, all right, but still, I don't know. Maybe you ought to organize a parallel event or something like that. I don't know. I'm very worried about, it's not like it's any huge loss. Like, okay, well, Chris Coons is not going to be tainted any worse, I guess, by having been involved in this thing. But it's been a long time coming, and now the National Prayer Breakfast is a place where you can only expect to be abused, and where the majority of participants will do nothing to stop the president from abusing you there. Now, if you think you could engineer an intervention next time where the communities of faith come together and A, protect you, and B, admonish the president not to do this at the National Prayer Breakfast, then fine. Give it a try. It might work. I mean, as a possibility, the germ of a possibility of a have you at long last no decency sort of moment there, I guess. But I don't see anything in the record of Chris Coons that makes me believe that he could pull it off, but maybe this is his moment. It hasn't been for the last couple of years, but maybe it could be next time. And I'd be willing to risk Chris Coons and his reputation on this one more time, perhaps. Anyway, let's see. Other news. I mentioned to you, I think yesterday, that Andrew McCabe has got a book out, and now it's time for the newspapers and magazines to start reviewing chapters of that book so that we can all know what's in it and have a good laugh. And here's the Atlantic's version of that exercise. Every day is a new low in Trump's White House. Sounds fun. And it is, in fact, I guess it's Andrew McCabe discussing his own book. So straight from the horse's mouth, this one in the Atlantic. The president steps over bright ethical and moral lines wherever he encounters them. Everyone in America saw it when he fired my boss. But I saw it firsthand, time and time again. There's an editor's note here, filling you in on exactly who he is and what's up with the book. McCabe, of course, former deputy director of the FBI, named acting director of the Bureau after Trump fired Comey in May of 2017. McCabe would himself be fired less than a year later in an exclusive adaptation from his book, The Threat, to be published next week. The rest of you can read it next week. McCabe describes his encounters with the president and the steps taken to protect the FBI's investigation into Russian efforts to influence the 2016 elections and into the Trump campaign's possible collusion with Russian actors. Shall we read a little bit, just for the entertainment value? On Wednesday, May 10th, 2017, my first full day on the job as acting director of the FBI, I sat down with senior staff involved in the Russia case, the investigation into alleged ties. You know all about what it is. I don't have to explain that to you, right? As the meeting began, my secretary relayed a message that the White House was calling. The president himself was on the line. Hello? I'm trying to get this call in between commercials and telly. I had spoken with him the night before in the Oval Office when he told me he had fired James Comey. A call like this was highly unusual. Presidents do not typically call FBI directors. There should be no direct contact between the president and the director except for national security purposes. The reason is simple. Investigations and prosecutions need to be pursued without a hint of suspicion that someone who wields power has put a thumb on the scale. The Russia team was in my office. I took the call on an unclassified line. That was another strange thing. The president was calling on a phone that was not secure. Great. The voice on the other end said, "It's Don Trump calling." Really? That's interesting, because I thought he didn't say Don for himself, that his son was Don Trump. I said, "Hello, Mr. President, how are you?" Apart from my surprise that he was calling at all, I was surprised that he referred to himself as Don. The president said, "I'm good. You know, boy, it's incredible. It's such a great thing. People are really happy about the fact that the director's gone. And it's just remarkable what people are saying. Have you seen that? Are you seeing that too?" He went on. "I received hundreds of messages from FBI people, how happy they are that I fired him. There are people saying things on the media. Have you seen that? What's it like there in the building?" This is what it was like. You could go to any floor and you would see small groups gathering in the hallways, some people even crying. The overwhelming majority liked and admired Director Comey, his personal style, the integrity of his conduct. Okay. Now we were laboring under the same dank gray shadow that had been creeping over Washington during the few months Donald Trump had been in office. I didn't feel like I could say any of that to the president on the phone. I'm not sure I would have wanted to say it to him in person either, or that he would have cared. I told him that people here were very surprised, but that we were trying to get back to work. The president said he thought most people in the FBI voted for him. He thought 80%. He asked me again, as he had in his office, if I knew that Comey told him 3 times that he was not under investigation. Then he got to the reason for his call. He said, I really want to come over there. I want to come to the FBI. I want to show all my FBI people how much I love them. So I think maybe it would be good for me to come over and speak to everybody, like tomorrow or the next day. That sounded to me like one of the worst possible things that could happen. He was the boss and he had every right to come, but I hoped the idea would dissipate on its own. He said, why don't you come down here and talk to me about that later? After we agreed on a time to meet, the president began to talk about how upset he was that Comey had flown home on his government plane from Los Angeles. Comey had been giving a speech there when he learned he was fired. The president wanted to know how that had happened. I told him that bureau lawyers had assured me there was no legal issue with Comey coming home on the plane. I decided that he should do so. The existing threat assessment indicated he was still at risk, so he needed a protection detail. Since the members of the protection detail would all be coming home, it made sense to bring everybody back on the same plane they'd used to fly out there. It was coming back anyway. The president flew off the handle. That's not right. I don't approve of that. That's wrong. He reiterated his point 5 or 7 times. I said, I'm sorry that you disagree, sir, but it was my decision and that's how I decided. The president said, I want you to look into that. And I thought to myself, what am I going to look into? I just told you that I made the decision. The ranting against Comey spiraled. I waited until he had talked himself out. Toward the end of the conversation, the president brought up the subject of my wife. Jill had unsuccessfully run for the Virginia State Senate back in 2015, and the president had said false and malicious things about her during his campaign in order to tarnish the FBI. He said, how's your wife? I said, she's fine. He said, when she lost the election, that must have been very tough to lose. How did she handle losing? Is it tough to lose? I replied, I guess it's tough to lose anything, but she's rededicated herself to her career and her job and taking care of the kids in the emergency room. Not taking care of the kids at home, like taking care of kids in the emergency room. Everybody's kids. That's what she does. He replied in a tone that sounded like a sneer. He said, yeah, that must have been really tough to lose, to be a loser. They all probably had smiles about that one on the other end of the line. All the people standing around his desk. You can just imagine it. I wrote a memo about this conversation that very day. I wrote memos about my interactions with President Trump for the same reason that Comey did, to have a contemporaneous record of conversations with a person who cannot be trusted. People do not appreciate how far we have fallen from normal standards of presidential accountability. Today, we have a president who is willing not only to comment prejudicially on criminal prosecutions, but to comment on ones that potentially affect him. He does both of these things almost daily. He is not just sounding a dog whistle, he is lobbying for a result. The president has stepped over bright ethical and moral lines wherever he has encountered them. Every day brings a new low. With the president exposing himself, I should just leave it there. No, but he exposing himself as a deliberate liar who will say whatever he pleases to get whatever he wants. That sounds familiar. And if he were on the box at Quantico, he would break the machine. And I guess they're talking about lie detectors, which are stupid and overrated anyway. But okay. After Comey's firing, this next section begins. We'll just read one more paragraph before we go out for the last break. After Comey's firing, the core of my concern had to do with what might happen to the Russia case if I were to be removed. I convened a series of meetings about that investigation, including the one interrupted by the call from the president, in which I directed an overall review of every aspect. Was the work on solid ground? Were there individuals on whom we should consider opening new cases? I wanted to protect the Russia investigation in such a way that whoever came after me could not just make it go away. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got one more segment here. Let's continue on with this. I think this is sort of important stuff. I just realized I'm reading the AMP version of this article. So far so good. It hasn't screwed us up too badly. As I was saying before we cut out for the break, McCabe is talking here about his desire to protect the Russia investigation in such a way that whoever came after me could not just make it go away. What is he up to? Let's find out. As requested, I went back to the White House that afternoon. The scene was almost identical to the one I had walked into the previous night. Trump was behind the resolute desk. He lifted one arm and jutted it out, fingers splayed, directing me to take a seat in one of the little wooden chairs in front of him. Reince Priebus, then the Chief of Staff, and Don McGahn, then the White House counsel, were in the other chairs. Both of them are gone. Actually, everybody in that is gone except for the idiot president, huh? The president launched back into his speech about what a great decision it was to fire Jim Comey, how wonderful it was that the director was gone because so many people did not like Comey, even hated him. The president actually used the word hate. Eventually, he changed the subject. He said that he wanted to come to FBI headquarters to see people and excite them and show them how much he loves the FBI. He pressed me to answer whether I thought this was a good idea. I said it was always a good idea to visit. I was trying to take some of the immediacy out of his proposal, to communicate that the door was always open so that he wouldn't feel like he had to crash through it right away. I knew what a disaster it could turn out to be if he came to the Hoover building in the near future. He pressed further, asking specifically, "Do you think it would be a good idea for me to come down now?" I said sure. So not really a great job of deflecting there. By the way, McCabe. Anyway, he looked at Don McGahn. The president said, "Don, what do you think? Do you think I should go down to the FBI and speak to the people?" McGahn was sitting in one of those wooden chairs to my right, making eye contact with Trump. He said, in a very pat and very prepared way, "If the acting director of the FBI is telling you he thinks it's a good idea for you to come visit the FBI, then you should do it." Don't say it was then. It's so dumb. Then McGahn turned and looked at me. And Trump looked at me and asked, "Is that what you're telling me? Do you think this is a good idea?" I mean, at this point, I'd be like, am I being videotaped or something? It was a bizarre performance. I said it would be fine. I had no real choice. This was not worth the ultimate sacrifice. All right, whatever. I think that's a little timid, to be honest. In this moment, I felt the way I'd felt in 1998 in a case involving the Russian mafia, when I'd sent a man I'll call Big Felix in to meet with a mafia boss named Dmitry Goofield. I don't know. Anyway, the same kind of thing was happening here in the Oval Office. Dmitry had wanted Felix to endorse his protection scheme. This is a dangerous business and it's a bad neighborhood. And you know, if you want, I can protect you from that. If you want my protection, I can protect you. Do you want my protection? The president and his men were trying to work me the way a criminal brigade would operate. For whatever reason, the visit to the FBI never happened. So I guess it worked. One of the regularly scheduled meetings with the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, one of the regularly scheduled meetings with Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and some of their staff came 2 days later on Friday, May 12th. After the meeting, I asked the deputy, Rod Rosenstein, if he could stay behind. In part, I wanted to talk with him about ground rules governing the separate investigations of the Russia case by the FBI and the Senate Intelligence Committee. Rosenstein had oversight because the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, had to recuse himself owing to his own interactions with Russians during the campaign. But my main message was this: I need you to protect the process. After speaking to these points, Rod shifted his gaze. His eyes were focused on a point in space a few yards beyond and behind towards the door. He started talking about the firing of Jim Comey. He was obviously upset. He said he was shocked that the White House was making it look as if Jim's firing had been his idea. He was grasping for a way to describe the nature of the situation. One remark stands out. He said, "There's no one I can talk to about this. There's no one here that I can trust." He asked for my thoughts about whether we needed a special counsel to oversee the Russia case. I said I thought it would help the investigation's credibility. Later that day, I went to see Rosenstein again. This is the gist of what I said. I feel strongly that the investigation would be best served by having a special counsel. I've been thinking about the Clinton email case and how we got twisted in knots over how to announce a result that did not include bringing charges against anyone. Had we appointed a special counsel in the Clinton case, we might not be in the present situation. Unless or until you make the decision to appoint a special counsel, the FBI will be subjected to withering criticism that could destroy the credibility of both the Justice Department and the FBI. Rosenstein was very engaged. He was not yet convinced. I brought the matter up with him again after the weekend. On Wednesday, we would be briefing the Hill. As I saw it, by informing Congress of the Bureau's actions, we would be drawing an indelible line around the cases we had opened, the 4 cases known publicly and any others that may have gone forward. The 4 known publicly were those of Carter Page, you know about him, George Papadopoulos, you know about him, Michael Flynn, we know all about him, and Paul Manafort. Okay, so without reading the descriptions of why they were under investigation, I think you all know that very well. On the afternoon of May 17th, Rosenstein and I sat at the end of a long conference table in a secure room in the basement of the Capitol. We were there to brief the so-called Gang of 8, remember them? The majority and minority leaders of the House and Senate, and the chairs and ranking members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. Rosenstein had, I knew, made a decision to appoint a special counsel in the Russia case. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic senator from New York, was to our right. Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, Senate Majority Leader, to our left. The mood in the room was sober. After reminding the committee of how the investigation began, I told them of additional steps we had taken. Then Rod took over and announced that he had appointed a special counsel to pursue the Russia investigation and that the special counsel was Robert Mueller. The Gang of 8 had questions. What was the scope of the inquiry? Who would oversee the special counsel? How could the special counsel get fired? Rod answered every question. Then it was over. When I came out of the Capitol, it felt like crossing a finish line. If I got nothing else done as acting director, I had done the one thing I needed to do. And I guess that is offering protection to the investigation by putting it in the hands of special counsel. So there you go. That's the big excerpt of the crazy first couple of days on the job for McCabe. So we are up to date on that, and it won't be until next week, I guess, that we hear a whole lot more from this book when the rest of the members of the press get their versions of it and can comb through it over the weekend. Let's see. Another important update that I believe Greg may have mentioned, but we should probably look at in more detail. Although, once again, I have an AMP version of this thing, and let's see if I can get the original version instead from the Washington Post. Let's read it. Here we go. This will make things a little easier. Spencer Sue on this piece. Federal judge finds Paul Manafort lied to Mueller probe about contacts with Russian aid. Now, that seems like the sort of thing like, of course, we've known this since forever about Mueller, except this is now the court finding, so he was lying even after he had entered into a cooperation agreement. This means something special. This may have big implications for further sentencing, and it may have all sorts of other implications for his case and others. Let's begin it this way. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort lied to prosecutors with special counsel Robert Mueller about matters close to the heart of their investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. A federal judge ruled on Wednesday. That's a whole new ballgame. The judge's finding that Manafort, age 69, nice, breached his cooperation deal with prosecutors by lying after his guilty plea could add years to his prison sentence and came after a set of sealed court hearings. Manafort's lies, the judge found, included his interactions and communications with Konstantin Kilimnik. You remember who he is. U.S. District Judge Amy Berman Jackson of the district, that is to say the District of Columbia, said Manafort also lied to the special counsel and the FBI and the grand jury about a payment from a company to a law firm, which he previously characterized as a loan repayment, and made false statements that were material to another Justice Department investigation whose focus has not been described in public filings in the Manafort case. Manafort's actions mean Mueller's office is no longer bound by the plea agreement, including prosecutors' promise to support a possible sentencing reduction for Manafort, accepting responsibility for his crimes. Jackson said she would factor in his deception at sentencing March 13th and will make public her reasoning about her findings as early as Friday, tomorrow, in another filing. Manafort had denied intentionally lying after his plea deal and through his attorneys attributed any conflicting statements to confusion or faulty recollection. Manafort pleaded guilty September 14th on the eve of jury selection for his trial in Washington to conspiring to defraud the United States, violate lobbying laws, and obstruct justice by witness tampering in connection with years of undisclosed work for Ukraine for a pro-Russian political party and Ukrainian politician Viktor. Now we get to say this again. I think I've been saying Viktor Yanukovych, and I am informed that it's Yanukovych, I guess, is the preferred pronunciation. So, okay, Viktor Yanukovych. He was also convicted by a jury in August for bank and tax fraud crimes in a separate federal case in Virginia. Jackson had said previously that she would consider whether to order Manafort to serve penalties in the two cases consecutively. Legal experts say Manafort faces a possible 7 to 10 year sentence in his related Virginia federal case, that is, which U.S. District Judge T.S. Ellis III postponed this month to await Jackson's ruling. Manafort faces up to 10 years in his district case. Mueller's prosecutors have said Manafort's lies about the frequency and substance of his contacts with Kilimnik go very much to the heart of what the special counsel's office is investigating. They highlighted Manafort's shifting account of an August 2016 meeting in New York City with Kilimnik, in which the pair discussed a peace plan for Ukraine. That's the cigar bar meeting there, while Manafort served as Trump's campaign chairman. A resolution of hostilities in Ukraine that leads to the lifting of sanctions against Russia is a top Kremlin foreign policy goal. Mueller's office also claims Manafort intentionally provided false information in debriefing sessions on several topics, including the extent and substance of his interactions with Kilimnik. Let's see. What part of this is still new? Of course, there's the passing of polling data on the U.S. presidential campaign to Kilimnik. Jackson issued her order after a hearing Wednesday that was held under seal to permit both sides to discuss matters under investigation and people who are not charged. In her order, the judge agreed with Manafort's defense and said the government had failed to show he lied when he denied having ongoing contact with Trump administration officials since they took office in January of 2017, and failed to show he lied about Kilimnik's role in the obstruction of justice conspiracy over witness tampering, in which Kilimnik was accused and Manafort pleaded guilty. In the deal with prosecutors, Manafort agreed to cooperate fully and truthfully with the government, seemingly giving investigators access to a witness who was at key events relevant to the Russia investigation. Trump Tower meeting attended by a Russian lawyer, the Republican National Convention, and a host of other behind-the-scenes discussions in the spring and summer of 2016. But instead, the deal collapsed, with prosecutors withdrawing any offer of recommendation for leniency and accusing Manafort in late November of lying repeatedly to them. Manafort has been jailed just outside Washington in Alexandria since June. Jackson's brief order did not add to what was previously known about the August 2016 meeting in the Grand Havana Room. Prosecutor Andrew Weissman said in a previous court hearing that the meeting included Rick Gates, Manafort's top deputy at the Trump campaign and in Ukraine, and who has also pleaded guilty in the Mueller investigation. Kilimnik has told the Washington Post that he and Manafort discussed unpaid bills, current news, etc. at the meeting, and that the sessions were private visits in no way related to politics or the presidential campaign in the U.S. In 2017, Kilimnik denied to the Post having connections to Russian intelligence. He's believed now to be in Moscow. The order marked the latest instance in which Manafort was found to have flouted the court's directions. Shortly after his indictment in late 2017, with a gag order in place in his case, Jackson scolded Manafort for helping ghostwrite an op-ed article for a newspaper in Ukraine defending his work there. In July, Jackson revoked Manafort's bail and ordered him jailed after prosecutors charged him with tampering with witnesses while he had been free pending trial, a crime to which he later pleaded guilty. He's not a good guy and not trustworthy, and now it's a matter of record in court. So I felt it was important to include that. Okay, let's see. Other stories that we can share with you before things close out for the day. This is an interesting one. Do I save this for Friday, or is there anything else that I need to shoehorn in for today? Yeah, let's save this one for Friday. That feels like a Friday story. Here's two things, I guess, that we can try and shoehorn in. One, let's see, was this passed on to me? I think this is one that Kate Sherrill sent to me yesterday. And let's try and get this one in here. From the Daily Beast's Betsy Woodruff and Erin Banco. I got their names reversed in the order there. It's Erin's first on this byline. Trump's DHS, Department of Homeland Security, guts task forces protecting elections from foreign meddling. What a brilliant idea at this particular point in time. I wonder who might think that was a great idea, and who also doesn't have any puppets. It's very curious why the leadership has not committed resources to prepare for the 2020 election, one Homeland Security official tells the Daily Beast, and here's more detail on that. 2 teams of federal officials assembled to fight foreign election interference are being dramatically downsized, according to 3 current and former Department of Homeland Security officials. And now those sources say they fear the department won't prepare adequately for election threats in 2020. Oh my gosh. The clear assessment from the intelligence community is that 2020 is going to be the perfect storm, said a DHS official familiar with the teams. We know Russia is going to be engaged. Why not? We have done nothing to discourage them, right? Other state actors have seen the success of Russia and realized the value of disinformation operations. So, it's very curious why the task forces were demoted in the bureaucracy and the leadership has not committed resources to prepare for the 2020 elections. The task forces, part of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, or CISA, were assembled in response to Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. One focuses in part on securing election infrastructure, and the other focuses on foreign influence efforts, including social media disinformation campaigns. One of the task forces is now half the size it was a few months ago, according to two DHS officials familiar with the task force, and there's no indication that DHS senior political leadership will staff it up or sustain it. Instead, there are concerns it will completely wither away. Like Newt Gingrich used to like to see things wither on the vine, right? The other task force also shrank significantly shortly after the midterms, according to that official, and before its members produced a thorough assessment of what happened during the 2018 elections. Our key allies are wondering why the U.S. is not more coordinated and not more proactive in dealing with this, said the DHS official. They don't understand why the U.S. is not getting its act together. And the answer is because we're Russia now. A DHS spokesperson confirmed that some people have been taken off the task forces and moved to other roles in the department. The spokesperson added that the department is bringing on new people to do election security work. As recently as this morning, Director Krebs confirmed election security remains a priority for CISA, perhaps, and in his testimony before the House Committee on Homeland Security, laying out the agency's plan to work with state and local election officials on broader engagement, better defining risk to election systems, and understanding the resources to manage that risk, said Sarah Sendek, the DHS spokesperson. In the run-up to the 2018 elections, DHS staffed the newly created Elections Task Force and Countering Foreign Influence Task Force by temporarily assigning personnel from across the department. The work of these task forces continues to this day and is being institutionalized as a permanent effort. While some of the personnel who were brought on to serve on these task forces as temporary assignments have returned to their regular roles, we are currently hiring new employees into permanent election positions to build out our team and support our efforts for 2020 and beyond, Sendek said. Seems to be like the opposite that's happening, though. One lawmaker with knowledge of the formation of CISA said the task forces were never intended to be permanent. In some sense, it's not surprising that these changes are happening. He said there was nothing set in stone that said these teams were going to stay in formation. At least that was my understanding. Others said they found the change concerning. The Trump administration intelligence chiefs in their worldwide threat assessment clearly stated that the use of influence operations from countries like Russia, China, and Iran pose a significant threat to the country, said John Cohen, the former Deputy Undersecretary for Intelligence and Analysis at DHS. If these reports are true, it's highly disturbing that the department and the administration are not more focused on dealing with that threat. The Election Task Force has worked to shield election infrastructure from foreign efforts to change vote counts, and the Foreign Influence Task Force is working to publicly reveal efforts by foreign actors to shape American political discourse on social media in hopes of significantly expanding Americans' understanding of the threat. It was also designed to improve DHS's coordination with foreign allies who face the same threat and to help DHS better alert the private sector about threats. The changes to the task force may make it harder for them to realize those goals, current and former officials say. It won't be 2016 all over again. The threat is changing, said a former DHS official. A thinly staffed task force working on that is not going to be equipped to keep up with the adversary. A few weeks before President Donald Trump's inauguration, then DHS Secretary Jay Johnson determined that DHS was responsible for helping protect election infrastructure, meaning polling places, voting machines, and voter databases, and all the other components that make elections happen. The new complex undertaking involved scores of state and local governments. A few years in, the department is still getting its footing. So the changes detailed here have people close to the department deeply concerned. because it's a very difficult task, and because DHS has never done it before, there's a lot of catching up to do, said the former DHS official. Even with a fully resourced effort, that would be an extremely tall task, but having it be deprioritized and lacking access to senior leadership is virtually impossible. That said, these changes appear to reflect the White House's lack of interest in beefing up election security, according to Paul Rosenzweig, formerly Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy at DHS. If the president isn't interested in, and there is no strategy, it's no surprise that DHS is not wasting its time, said Rosenzweig, now a senior fellow at the R Street Institute. The failure of the White House to take this seriously is perhaps the single most significant dereliction of duty. The White House press briefing on August 2nd, 2018, focused on election security, and the Trump administration has sanctioned Russian individuals and entities in retaliation for the 2016 election meddling. Since the beginning of this administration, President Trump has implemented a whole-of-government approach to safeguard our nation's elections. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said at the time, the president has made it clear that his administration will not tolerate foreign interference in our elections from any nation state or other dangerous actor. Before the midterms, both task forces reported directly to Chris Krebs, the Senate-confirmed director of CISA, but after the midterms that changed. Now they report to an official who is much lower in the chain of command. The shift could seriously inhibit their effectiveness, according to one of the DHS officials, and suggests their work is not a top priority for DHS political leadership. Krebs testified on Wednesday before the House Homeland Security Committee. The hearing focused on election security infrastructure and partnership between DHS and state election officials. Well, let's see. It does go on a little bit longer here, but I think we've got the basic gist of things, and just a few minutes left to try and cram in one other story, or at least parts of it. And I'd like you to know about this one, too. Where did this go? Yes. Washington Post piece. And we'll give you the headline and perhaps a couple of the beginning paragraphs here. This is an interesting thing to keep an eye on, too. Stephen Muffson reporting this one from the business section of the Washington Post. Trump urges Tennessee Valley Authority to keep open an aging coal-burning power plant. Now, why? Not just because I love coal, and it's because what the coal miners wanted, but there's a very specific reason. Some of you may have read the story. Some of you are just going to be able to guess outright. President Trump set up a clash with an independent agency, remember that's what the TVA is, on Monday evening with his call for the TVA to keep open an aging coal plant that buys much of its coal from a company chaired by Robert E. Murray, one of the president's major supporters. The TVA board will meet Thursday, that's today, to consider whether to close the 49-year-old plant, which operated only intermittently last year, because it was no longer needed to supply uninterrupted power, known as base load. The board also is considering shutting down a 52-year-old coal unit at Bull Run, not the one in Virginia, but the one near Oak Ridge, Tennessee. In a tweet Monday night, Trump said, because this is important to him, coal is an important part of our electricity generation mix, and TVA, or he addresses it on Twitter, TVA News, should give serious consideration to all factors before voting to close viable power plants like Paradise No. 3 in Kentucky. But the TVA is leaning toward the closure of the Paradise and Bull Run plants precisely because they are not viable. The agency has already said that closing the Paradise coal plant would have no significant effect. The unit doesn't provide the level of flexibility needed to balance hourly, daily, and seasonal changes in energy consumption, etc., etc. What really is going on here, though, is that one of President Trump's personal friends, and who knows, maybe even a Mar-a-Lago club mate for all I know, makes his money by selling coal to these government-operated plants, and they're just not necessary anymore. And so a major portion, I guess, of the company's income is on shaky ground. Not that they couldn't find someone else to sell the coal to, but they want the guaranteed government contract, and they think they can get it because he's friends with the president. That's basically it. Murray, the founder of Murray Energy and a leading donor to Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, has been pressing the president to help prop up coal-fired plants since the beginning of the administration. In Energy Secretary Rick Perry's first month in office, Murray presented a 4-page action plan to rescue the coal industry. The plan said that commissioners at 3 independent regulatory agencies must be replaced. EPA staff, agency staff slashed, and safety and pollution rules overturned. Why? Because he wants to continue to soak up that sweet, sweet government lucre, I guess. And Donald Trump is just the guy to help him do that. All right, time for us to close things out and hand the reins over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next. I'll tell you a little bit about what's coming up here. What do you know? The Elliott Abrams face-off with Congresswoman Omar. Definitely going to take top billing there. Then on the rest of the menu, a treasured sanctuary for butterflies in Texas is going to war with Trump over the border wall.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
I'm not kidding. This butterfly thing is a huge, huge epicenter of the border wall fight. They're going to court. There's been a couple of stories about it at Daily Kos. I haven't been able to shoehorn them in. I'm so thankful that Justice can pick up the reins on that one. I'd love to follow up on that maybe a little bit tomorrow. Do keep an eye on that one. It's going to be interesting.